So about a year or year and a half ago, I purchased the Canon R6 for the first time. And I just remember getting the camera in the box and I was like super pumped and excited. I wanted to go outside and shoot with it. And my first YouTube video is actually with the Canon R6. It was a Canon R6 cinematic video. And over the past year, I've been able to take this camera with me on my travels and used it for professional client work, for weddings, for brands, for companies, for festivals. And I just wanted to share with you guys my experience with this camera, some of the pros and cons of using this camera. Now that we're in 2022, I feel there's a ton of new cameras on the market. I feel that cameras are evolving. You know, cameras are now shooting at 6K, 8K. I mean, we're talking DSLR cameras, not just cinema cameras. And I just wanted to make a video and share with you guys, is this a camera worth buying in 2022? Should you buy the Canon R6? Before owning the Canon R6, I was using a 5D Mark IV. So going from a 5D Mark IV to a R6 was a huge upgrade. Now let's go ahead and get into the pros of this camera. So right off the bat, when I first bought this camera, the one thing I absolutely loved was the 3-inch flip out LCD screen. Vlogging with this camera or even getting the low and high angle shots, it's super nice and convenient to have. When I used the Canon 5D Mark IV, they didn't have any flip out LCD screen, so going from something that was stuck to the back and using an external monitor to a flip out screen, it just made life so much easier. And this is one of the features I love about the R6. The Canon R6 shoots 4K 60 frames per second. It also shoots 1080 120 and it has C-Log 3. I mean, what more do you need? Let's go ahead and talk about the autofocus system. So my experience using the autofocus system in the Canon R6 has been amazing. It's been reliable. I've been able to depend on it, especially when I'm mounting it to a gimbal or a glide cam. And in any situation where I'm moving quickly and I need to stay focused on my subject, this camera has been able to deliver those results. Now, the one thing that I love about Canon is how they're upgrading and always improving in the autofocus system. And I know it's something that's very important to a lot of people, especially when looking into a new camera. Now, I believe that the autofocus system in the Canon R6 is the same as the one in the R5, and it's amazing. Whoever uses RF lenses know that it's super expensive to invest in, and I've been invested into EF lenses. However, I am using the Lowlight RF to EF adapter, and when I'm using the autofocus using this adapter, it's amazing. It's super fast, super quick, especially when I'm shooting video and photo, no problems at all. There's nothing much more to say about the autofocus system besides it's amazing. I mean, going from a Canon 5D Mark IV to the R6, there's not much to say except the fact that I can rely on it. The Canon R6 battery life is amazing, and the batteries are really tiny. They use the LP-E6 and H batteries, so the standard pretty much Canon batteries, and they're small and tiny, easy to pack. You know, they're not bulky, big or anything, and you just slap them in and go out and shoot. And like I said, it lasts hours. I can have about 3 or 4 in a bag and shoot the entire day. Another pro to me is having the dual SD card slots. Now this is amazing. In my 5D Mark IV, I believe it was CF Express and SD card. Here you can have dual SD cards. The reason I love having dual SD card slots is for 2 reasons. The first reason is when I'm recording video, I can have the option of recording onto both cards. So in case one SD card fails or corrupts, I have another card as backup. And that to me is important. Now, the second reason why I love having dual SD card slots is because I can continuously shoot and it'll go from one memory card to the next. So having that option where it's not just gonna stop recording because the card's full, but instead transfer over into the next card and continue shooting is amazing. I don't know if anyone's ever encountered where you're shooting an interview and your card starts to get full and you can see it saying you have 1 minute left. Well, here it's like I can shoot video and once the card's full, it'll go on to the second. So having those 2 options is really nice to have. Now let's go ahead and talk about the durability of this camera. Now this camera has a little bit of weight to it, but not where it's too heavy where you're just like, your arms feel tired. You know, and that's one of the things I love about it is that it's well built. I mean, it doesn't feel cheap in plastic. I've never dropped this camera before, but I imagine if I drop it, it's gonna be okay. Just because of the way that it's built and the way that it feels pretty tough. Speaking to beginners, when you pick up the Canon R6, I mean, the menu system is so simple and easy to learn and understand that you're gonna have no problems when picking this up. Now, that was the one thing I was afraid of going from a 5D Mark IV to a R6, was that the menu system was gonna change going into a mirrorless camera. And it hasn't. It's beautiful. Everything that I've learned on the 5D Mark IV has transferred over into the R6. And that's the one thing that made my life so much easier, was that I knew the menu system the moment I picked up this camera. There was a few, obviously, features in the camera I had to learn, but for the most part, everything remained the same. Let's go ahead and talk about the image stabilization. So the R6 has a 5-axis image stabilization. And after using it for the past year, there's been times where I may have forgot my gimbal, or rather shoot handheld because I'm running, gunning, and I can depend on the 5-axis image stabilization. I mean, it's powerful, it's amazing, especially when vlogging. Everything is perfect and there is no shakiness, and I just love having this feature inside of the camera. The low light image out of this camera is amazing. I mean, over the past year, I've done tons of festivals where we're only lit on the stage, and this camera can capture everything in that situation. And I don't even need to add any post noise reduction on a lot of the footage. To have the footage be so crystal clear at night in low light, to me, is a plus, especially if you're going to be shooting at night and working with low light situations. This camera is that camera. Let's go ahead and talk about the cons on this camera. So the first con is the overheating issue. It's a little story time. So there's been about 3 times this camera has overheated, and those 3 times were very important times. The first time was at a wedding. It was during a ceremony, and I'd say about 5 minutes before they were gonna kiss, the camera just gave me that blinking temperature sign, and it said overheating, and I freaked out. But luckily I have a second camera, which is very important, and you know, I was saved. But in that situation, when time is very valuable and you don't really have a lot of time to work with, you know, that can be a very big problem. However, I will say that in the 3 times that this camera did overheat, that it was extremely hot, and you know, I would have expected a camera to overheat, but in my past experiences using DSLR cameras and being in situations where it's extremely hot, I've never encountered that situation. It's not a good situation to be in or to encounter, especially when you're working with a professional client. I don't know if it's a firmware issue or if it's something to do with inside of the camera, but especially with these DSLR cameras that are super tiny and compact, shooting at these high resolution, I mean, the motors are working. That's why I believe with the EOS R5C, they did a built-in fan. But that does not take away from the fact that in tough situations when you're working with a client that needs you and your camera starts overheating and you start getting that blinking light, I mean, there's really nothing you can do except maybe put your camera in a freezer or a cooler. The second con is the rolling shutter, and this one is terrible. I mean, when I have the image stabilization on or off, you know, I try to turn it off, but even with it on or off, you know, when I'm doing video, I can oftentimes see tons of wobbles when I'm moving the camera, you know, or when I'm vlogging with a wide lens, when I'm working with either the 16 to 35 or even the Canon 14mm lens, there is tons of wobbles, and it almost makes the footage unusable. Especially for a lot of the videos that I produce, like festivals and whatnot, I'm constantly moving quick, and I can see that the rolling shutter, there's just tons of wobbles, making it look like a hula girl. And that is not good, and that's one of the cons that I don't like about this camera. Another con with the R6 that I know a lot of YouTubers are struggling with, and not just me, is the codec. Now, the codec is really hard and tough to work with. I use both Windows and Mac, and it's very difficult. First and foremost, I'm shooting everything in log, so when I pop in my SD card into my computer, I'm not able to play back the footage unless you get a third-party supporting program that's going to open up those files, and even then it's just really difficult to work with. And I don't know what Canon was really thinking about that, but to kind of keep it simple, it's very difficult to work with, and that's one of the struggles I have with this camera. So closing thoughts on this amazing camera. Overall, I think it's treated me really well. Over the past year, I've used this camera on various of projects and it's been reliable, dependent. I mean, the resolution and the image straight out of the camera is flawless. And I think that if you do pick it up, you'll enjoy it and be very happy. And I mean, come on, for $2,500, this camera is worth it. If you guys did enjoy the video, please give it a like, a subscribe, and comment down below if you own a Canon R6 or looking to pick one up. I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts on it. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.